And what do you say about Macron? He's always go back and forth, right? Now he's talking about he's interested in coming to the BRICS meeting. He said that last year also. And
Yeah,
he also saying that he invited Putin. I saw the Chinese report to the next month. They have a celebration for the Normandy celebration, something,
yeah.
which clearly angered Britain and the US. What is going on here? He seems very much want to have the independent of being away from the Anglo-Saxon, fear. But then from time to time he will say things threatening Russia as well. So what do you see of that?
Well, I think this is again the problem with Macron is that at a fundamental level, he senses the trap that France is in, that it's trapped inside this Atlantic system. Like most French people, he resents this deeply, or at least like a lot of French people, he resents this deeply. He understands that this is marginalizing France and that France is becoming a declining power and that it's ultimately bad for France's economy and for France's own self-respect. And the French people are people who are very proud of their country. They want France to be an important player in world events. So I think he has all those feelings as well. At the same time, he is still trapped within the American system, and he doesn't have the courage or the political will to break through, to break out, and I think he's afraid. I mean, I think he's afraid of the Atlanticists around him. And of course, if what we were talking about at the start of this program, the assassinations and all of that, he's probably afraid of that also.
Yeah.
So he oscillates. And like a lot of people who intellectually know that the course that they're taking is wrong, he sometimes goes to extremes. He lacks the strength of personality and the courage and the fundamental integrity to do what needs to be done. And that's why, for all his real intelligence, he's far from a stupid man. For all his real intelligence, he's become this very eccentric and volatile leader who I think increasingly fewer and fewer people take seriously.
Yeah. Okay, I watched your conversation yesterday with Robert Bond. Such an interesting conversation.
Mm.
I think you guys ran out of time to answer the questions from the audience.
Yeah,
You should invite him
yeah.
back just to answer questions. But anyway, so there's many cases you guys talked about. What is going on with Julian Assange? So he went
Mm.
appeal to appeal. Is that what it is?
That's right. So he won an appeal. He won a right to appeal
Okay.
against the decision by the lower court to extradite him, to send him to the United States. Many people, myself included, doubted that that would ever happen, but it did happen. It did happen on Monday, and the reason it happened, I think I've explained that, was that the British judges didn't want to do it, but they felt they had no choice because they have the fear, the spectre of the European Court of Human Rights looming over them. And sending him to the United States would have obviously violated his human rights, specifically his right to free speech and his right against discrimination. So, this is why it's happened. It's a big event. It's not something the British judiciary wanted to do, but they've been pulled in this direction because ultimately they have to administer the law. And had they gone against the law by simply extraditing him to the United States, that would have shattered their own credibility, which they do care about, their credibility internationally. And it would have opened up all kinds of problems, especially if the European Court of Human Rights had come down against them. So, very grudgingly, through gritted teeth, they made the decision that they did. Now, this, of course, opens up many possibilities because even though people say that this is a narrow ground of appeal, it is actually a very important ground of appeal. And in arguing it, you could end up finding that you're arguing pretty much all the important points that people have been making in the Assange case all along about the rights of journalists, the right of free speech, and things like that.
Yeah, but in the meantime, he's still in prison, right? So it's this kind of a he's not even convicted of anything, but they imprison him. I think I'm troubled with that, you know. So whatever the appeal, even he wins, he's still not free, you know, on bail or anything.
It,
Isn't that part of the
it,
deal? They're just trying to, you know, torture him that way.
It is absolutely outrageous. And by the way, I mean, the United Nations has actually said that as far as they're concerned, he is being tortured. He's
Hmm.
been subjected to extreme physical treatment, amounting to torture and outright psychological torture. Um, it is outrageous. It is inhuman what has happened. That he's been kept in this high security prison in these terrible conditions in a cell. That he's been kept separated from his family, his wife, and his young children in this appalling way. It's absolutely shocking. And as a British person, I am extremely ashamed of it. And when I see British officials going to various countries around the world, China being one, and lecturing them about human rights, I think about the prisoner at Belmarsh, and I say to myself, "How dare you?" So I mean, I just think, I would say that point as well. You're absolutely right. He's not serving time for any sentence that he's committed in Britain. There are no real grounds to hold him anymore. He's been granted leave to appeal. He ought to be released.
Yeah.
That is the legal, humane, and proper thing to do. He should never have been kept in this way at all. Um, anyway, we'll see what they do this time. I doubt the British authorities will release him, but it's just possible, I suppose, that an application could be made to the High Court to release him, and it might be granted.
Okay. So his lawyer is working on that, I guess, to ask
Well,
again for.
I would hope so. I would
Okay.
certainly hope so. I mean, I would expect so.
You see, and Robert was talking about this Amos Miller case, which
Yeah,
I find extraordinary because it's also very interesting. Because my own program, I was talking to my audience just a few days ago, like a week ago,
yeah,
about the Amish. I was explaining to my audience what Amish and Mennonites, what they were prosecuted, they were discriminated in Europe and come to the United States to get shelter. And all they asking is just land that they can provide, you know, grow their own food and build their own house and be left alone. And I
yeah.
was explaining to them, well, they're not being left alone, are they? I mean,
No, no, the land of religious freedom. You know, when there's during the Second World War, was it Franklin Roosevelt? One of his four things that America was fighting for was the right to practice your religion freely. Well, apparently it doesn't apply in the U.S. any longer. If you're an Amish, then it absolutely doesn't. But there we go. I mean, does that surprise? Does it surprise you? I mean, it doesn't surprise
no.
me. I mean, the entire trend in the United States, in Britain, and in Europe as well, is for the country to become increasingly intolerant and increasingly oppressive.
Mhm.
And of course, it isn't just that they're being impressed for religious reasons, though I should say straight away, by the way, that in part they are. I mean, the fact that they live the lifestyle that they do and that they have the opinions that they do is increasingly unattractive to more and more people in power in the United States and indeed in Europe also. But of course, what the lifestyle they lead is very, very contrary to corporate interests,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is what the case ultimately is all about. And again, I think it might be of interest to Chinese people to see the way in which the corporate interests have been able to align themselves to a state bureaucracy
Mhm.
and are able to use the legal system in order to oppress someone and basically to try to destroy him and to destroy him legally by bringing case after case after case against him, draining his resources, exhausting him, and eventually breaking him. And again, that isn't, I think, what many people believe happens in the United States, but it does.
Yeah, I also noticed that they don't even believe to try to convict you, right? They just drain you. and exhaust you, right? That's what that's their way of punishing you. And they, of course, making that an example so other people wouldn't dare, right? There is
Yes.
another case in Australia. I don't know what's going on in Australia. I mean, there are the two cases. One is a whistleblower, David McBride. I think you probably know. And then
Yeah.
there is a Don Duggan case, right? That he's a U.S. pilot. He was a pilot now being accused. I mean, he's Australian now because he married an Australian woman, and he's now being accused of being a Chinese spy. I mean, seriously.
Yeah. I mean, the spy mania, by the way, is out of control. It's out of control in Europe. It's out of control in Britain, as you know. I mean, terrible business. And as I said, this use of the legal system in this way, as you correctly say, is outrageous.
And they're seizing assets, like also surprising to me with Don Duggan's case, because he's mounting a legal fee. So his wife has a farm and they're selling. The day before they sell the farm, the Australian government seized that farm and saying that that's some kind of proceeds of his illegal activity, illegal activity. And so
Mm.
they just seized his asset. I mean, the lengths they go is very stunning to me in UK, in Australia, and in the United States, which I've before always believed that in the Anglo-Saxon sphere, in particular, the legal system, the law, it seems like well respected,
Mm.
but that doesn't seem the case anymore. I guess in the end, the system is simply just as good as the people who are running the system, isn't it?
I'm afraid this is completely correct. And I have to say, for me personally, having once been part of that legal system in Britain, this has been for me the saddest thing, because I absolutely believed in, the legal system in England. I believed in the good faith of the people who were operating it. I believed in the good faith of the judges. It has been a shock to me to see the legal system behaving increasingly as it does. And of course, I had many, many dealings with American lawyers, especially from New York. A
Mhm.
very high opinion of from them. Some of them were my friends. I look back on the days I worked with them still, with pleasure. And again, I find it incomprehensible that this legal system that has been so important in making life in Britain and in the United States pleasant and
Mhm.
civilized and good is being destroyed in this way, because this is what is happening. I mean, this is a nihilistic approach to law. It's it's not a it's not law that's been practiced anymore. It's anti-law.
Yeah. But don't they? I mean, the law are established by the ruling elites to
Yeah,
serve, I would say, first and foremost, the elite's interests, I would think.
yeah.
So aren't they afraid that when they are corrupting the legal system like this, that fundamentally it will be dangerous for them when there's a country that nobody believes in the law anymore? Isn't that dangerous
You
situation?
you would have thought so,
Yeah.
because of course you're absolutely right. I mean, they are destroying one of the key institutions that has put them in the position that they are. But they seem to be blind to that. They are becoming more reckless and more dangerous, as we discussed at the start of the program when we were discussing, the fact that they might be
Mm.
involved in assassinations. In fact, I can say that if they are prepared to trash their own legal systems in the way that they're doing, then it makes it more plausible that they're prepared to engage in assassinations in all sorts of places. So I mean, you're absolutely right, but they seem blind to that.
Mhm.
They seem to have got themselves into a situation of, well, being basically out of control.